The Alpha King thought she was human, until she saved him from silver bullets. Hello, everyone. The first time Alara Whitmore saw the Alpha King, he was standing over a dying man with blood on his hands and winter in his eyes. She should have been afraid. Instead, she pushed past him and said, "Move, or your scout won't survive the next minute." Before we continue, please subscribe and turn on notifications to help this channel grow. Now, back to Ashvale Crossing, where one quiet act of mercy was about to draw two guarded hearts into the same dangerous path. Rain had fallen since dawn, turning the narrow road beyond the village into a ribbon of black mud. Alara had been gathering feverfew near the tree line when she heard the horse scream. By the time she reached the ditch, the animal had fled, leaving a young man twisted beneath the broken remains of a saddle. His dark blonde curls were plastered to his forehead. Blood soaked the side of his gray traveling coat. "Stay with me," Alara whispered, kneeling beside him. The stranger's green eyes fluttered open. "Patrol," he breathed. "They found us." She did not ask who. The wound answered enough. Beneath the torn cloth, the flesh around the bullet hole had turned an unnatural gray. Alara's stomach tightened. She had treated hunting accidents, knife wounds, and winter sickness, but never anything that seemed to poison the body from within. Still, fear had never been useful at a bedside. She pressed folded linen against the wound, ignoring the blood warming her fingers. "What's your name?" "Caleb Monroe." "Good. Caleb, look at me. You are not dying in this ditch." His mouth twitched as though he wanted to laugh, but pain stole the breath from him. Alara removed the tarnished locket from beneath her blouse and tucked it safely inside her collar before leaning closer. The little moonstone had belonged to the mother she barely remembered. Ruth had always warned her never to lose it, though she refused to explain why. Hoofbeats thundered through the trees before Alara could question Caleb again. 6 riders emerged from the rain, all dressed in black leather marked with the crest of a roaring wolf. The man at their center dismounted before his horse had fully stopped. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried authority like a blade no one else could touch. Dark hair clung to his temples, framing a thin scar along his right cheekbone. His steel-blue gaze moved from Caleb to Alara, measuring every detail. "Step away from him," he ordered. The weight in his voice struck the air with enough force to make the other riders lower their eyes. Alara felt the pressure, but it did not bend her. "Not until I stopped the bleeding." Surprise flashed across his face and vanished. "Do you know who you're speaking to?" "A man blocking my light." One of the guards inhaled sharply. Caleb made a faint sound that might have been a laugh. The stranger crouched across from her, his expression hardening when he saw the wound. "Silver," he said. Alara glanced up. "The bullet. A kind meant for my people." "My people." The words settled between them, carrying a meaning she did not yet understand. He washed her hands as she cleaned the wound with crushed yarrow and warm water from her flask. "You're human," he said, not as a question. "Last I checked. You have no scent of a wolf." Alara's fingers paused for half a heartbeat. It was not the first time someone had looked at her as though something important was missing, but it was the first time the absence seemed to trouble a king. Caleb stirred weakly. "She saved me, Your Majesty." The title changed the reign itself. Alara slowly raised her eyes. Every story told along the northern border had mentioned Ronan Blackwell, the Alpha King whose enemies disappeared and whose silence frightened even powerful men. Yet the man before her did not look cruel. He looked tired, watchful, and far too familiar with loss. Ronan studied her as if kindness were a language he no longer trusted. Then he looked down at Caleb, whose breathing had begun to steady beneath Alara's hands. "Everett," he called. A sandy-haired officer stepped forward. "Search the road. Whoever fired that bullet may still be near." Ronan removed his black cloak and laid it over Caleb without hesitation. The gesture was so gentle that Alara nearly missed it. When his hand brushed hers, warmth rushed through her palm, sudden and strange. Ronan felt it too. His eyes snapped to hers. For one breath, neither of them moved. Then a distant crack echoed from the forest. Not thunder. A gunshot. Ronan rose, placing himself between Alara and the trees. "You're coming with us," he said. Alara stared at the dark woods, where something unseen had already begun to hunt them. "I don't remember agreeing." "You saved one of my men," he replied, his gaze never leaving the shadows. Now I need to know why someone used Silver to make sure he never returned home. Alara had expected the Alpha King's escort to take her back to Ashvale Crossing once Caleb was stable. Instead, she found herself riding beneath a borrowed hood while the royal convoy climbed toward Blackridge Citadel. Caleb lay in a covered wagon behind them, guarded by 2 soldiers and watched closely by Everett Hayes, the sandy-haired officer Ronan trusted with commands he did not explain. The fortress appeared through the evening mist like a dark crown carved into the mountain. Its towers rose above pine-covered cliffs, each narrow window glowing against the gathering dusk. Alara had spent her life avoiding places built to remind ordinary people of their smallness. Blackridge did not need to try. The moment she entered its gates, conversation stopped. Wolves turned toward her with open curiosity, then confusion. Some inhaled discreetly. Others made no effort to hide it. "They cannot place your scent," Everett said as he walked beside her. His tone was courteous, though his hazel eyes remained cautious. "Neither can His Majesty. That seems to trouble everyone more than the wounded man. Things we cannot identify often do." He led her through stone corridors to the royal infirmary, where a stern woman with silver threaded through her dark hair stood over Caleb's bed. "Dr. Miriam Caldwell," Everett said. "The woman who kept him alive is Alara Whitmore." Miriam examined Alara once, swiftly and completely, before turning back to the wound. "Tell me everything you used." There was no condescension in her voice, only urgency. Alara described the yarrow, pressure binding, and cleansing mixture while Miriam removed the bloody dressing. A thin gray line had spread from the wound toward Caleb's ribs. "The metal carried something else," Alara said. "A poison. More likely an enchantment," Miriam replied. "Silver slows our healing. These markings stop it entirely." Ronan stood near the window, still wearing rain-darkened leather. He had barely spoken since they arrived, but Alara felt his attention whenever she moved. "Can you save him?" he asked. Miriam's silence answered first. Alara leaned over Caleb. Beneath the metallic odor, she noticed a faint bitter scent clinging to the damaged flesh. "Do you have winterroot?" Miriam frowned. "It is useless against silver. Not against what was mixed with it." Minutes later, Alara crushed the pale root into steaming water and added 2 drops of pine resin. She soaked clean cloth in the mixture, then placed it over the wound. Caleb convulsed. Ronan stepped forward, power tightening the room. "What did you do?" "Gave the poison somewhere to go." Dark fluid seeped through the cloth. The gray line stopped spreading. Miriam's expression shifted from doubt to startled respect. "Where did you learn that?" "My aunt taught me to listen before treating an injury. The body usually tells you what harmed it." "Human bodies, perhaps," said a smooth voice from the doorway. A lean man entered wearing immaculate black gloves. His ash-blonde hair was combed neatly away from a pale, composed face. He bowed to Ronan. "Your Majesty, Gideon Mercer, Master of Royal Intelligence." His light eyes settled on Alara. "And our unexpected guest." Alara disliked the gentleness of his smile. It felt practiced. "Miss Whitmore happened to be near the attack," Gideon continued. "Near enough to find the only survivor before our scouts did." Everett's jaw tightened. "She also prevented that survivor from dying." "Which makes her valuable," Gideon said. "Not innocent." Ronan's gaze sharpened, yet he did not challenge the accusation. Alara felt something inside her close. She had seen that pause before. The quiet moment when powerful people decided kindness was more suspicious than cruelty. Miriam removed the cloth and checked Caleb's pulse. "He is improving. Whatever she did worked." "Then she remains under royal protection," Ronan said. Relief had barely touched Alara before he added. "And inside the citadel until we understand how she recognized a poison designed for wolves." Their eyes met across the bed. "Protection," Alara said softly. "With locked doors?" Something like regret flickered over his features. "For tonight." Gideon's gloved fingers tapped once against his sleeve. A sensible precaution. Later, alone in a guest chamber far finer than any room she had known, Alara pressed her hand against the moonstone locket beneath her collar. It felt warmer than usual. From beyond the closed door came 2 guards' lowered voices. One mentioned the silver residue. The other whispered that the same bitter plant had been found years ago near an abandoned sanctuary called the Hollow Chapel. Alara went still. Ruth had forbidden her from approaching that place since childhood. Then the locket pulsed once against her skin, almost like a second heartbeat. Sleep refused to come. Alara sat beside the narrow window of her guest chamber until the first gray light touched the mountain peaks, replaying the guard's whispered words again and again. Hollow Chapel. Ruth had never spoken its name with anger, only with fear. As a little girl, Alara had once wandered toward the abandoned sanctuary after chasing a white fox through the woods. Ruth had found her before sunset, trembling more than the child she carried home. "Promise me," she had pleaded. "No matter what you hear or who asks, never go there." It was the only promise Ruth had ever demanded. A knock interrupted the memory. Everett stood outside with a guarded expression. "His Majesty requests your company." "Is that a request?" Alara asked quietly. "Today, yes." She followed him through the waking citadel, where servants lit fireplaces and soldiers exchanged the night's reports. The atmosphere felt heavier than before. Every face seemed stretched by restless anticipation. In the council chamber, maps covered a long oak table. Ronan stood beside them, sleeves rolled back, studying markings that spread across the northern forests. Gideon Mercer remained nearby with his gloved hands folded neatly behind his back, while Dr. Miriam Caldwell sorted several small metal fragments inside a wooden tray. Ronan looked up as Alara entered. Caleb regained consciousness before dawn. Relief softened her features. "Can I see him?" "Soon." Miriam lifted one of the fragments with silver tongs. "First, I want your opinion." Alara leaned closer. Tiny dark stains clung to the etched bullet. She inhaled carefully. Beneath the cold metallic scent lingered the same bitter trace she had noticed the day before. "Nightshade vine," she murmured. "Not enough to kill by itself." Miriam nodded. "Exactly. Someone combined it with silver." Alara frowned. "Nightshade vine doesn't grow near Ashvale Crossing." Gideon answered before anyone else could, except around abandoned ruins. A silence settled across the room. Ronan's gaze shifted toward her. "You recognized it immediately." She hesitated only a moment. "Because I've smelled it once before." "Where?" The question came gently, yet it carried unmistakable weight. Alara looked down at the scarred tabletop. "Near Hollow Chapel." Everett straightened. Gideon's pale eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Ronan stepped closer without raising his voice. "Tell me everything you remember." "Very little." She wrapped her fingers around the moonstone beneath her collar. "I was a child. My aunt brought me home before I reached the building." She never explained why. Gideon exchanged a thoughtful glance with Ronan. "Then perhaps it is time someone did." Before Alara could respond, a young guard hurried into the chamber. "Your Majesty, Caleb insists on speaking with you immediately." They crossed the infirmary together. Caleb looked exhausted but far stronger than the previous evening. When he saw Alara, gratitude brightened his tired face. "She wasn't supposed to be there," he said, struggling to sit upright. "The attack, they knew exactly where we'd ride." Ronan rested a hand on the bed rail. "Did you recognize anyone?" Caleb swallowed painfully. "No faces, only a voice." His breathing grew uneven. One of them said the king must never reach the chapel. The room fell still. Even Gideon stopped moving. Ronan looked toward the map visible through the open doorway. Why would an abandoned sanctuary matter now? No one answered. Later that afternoon, Ronan saddled his own horse in the lower courtyard. Alara found him tightening the straps with practiced efficiency. "You're leaving," she observed. "To investigate Hollow Chapel." "Alone?" "With Everett." She watched him for a long moment before speaking. "You won't find what you're looking for without someone who recognizes the place." Ronan met her eyes. "Your aunt warned you never to return." "She did. And yet you're asking to come." Alara drew a slow breath. Every instinct urged her to stay behind locked walls where questions could not follow. But another feeling, quieter and impossible to ignore, told her that every strange thread in her life was leading toward that forgotten sanctuary. "If answers are waiting there," she said, "they belong to both of us now." Ronan studied her face, searching for hesitation. Finding none, he gave a single nod. High above the courtyard, Gideon watched from a stone balcony, his expression unreadable as Alara and the Alpha King rode together toward the shadowed forest where old promises, buried memories, and unseen eyes were already waiting. The road to Hollow Chapel narrowed until even the horses seemed reluctant to continue. Towering pines swallowed the afternoon light, and the silence between their trunks carried the weight of forgotten years. Ronan rode in front with steady focus while Everett guarded the rear, never allowing his attention to drift from the surrounding forest. Alara remained between them, her fingers resting against the moonstone hidden beneath her collar. The closer they came, the warmer it became, as though it recognized the path before she did. When the abandoned sanctuary finally appeared through the trees, it looked less like a place of worship than the memory of one. Cracked stone walls leaned beneath creeping vines, broken stained glass shimmered across the floor, and a weathered crescent had fallen from the roof onto the ruined altar. Alara stopped without realizing it. A deep ache settled inside her chest. She had never stood there before, yet every shattered arch felt strangely familiar. Ronan noticed the change in her expression. "You remember something," he said quietly. "Not memories," she answered. "Only a feeling that I've already lost this place." He stepped inside first, motioning for Everett to secure the entrance. Dust drifted through pale beams of sunlight, while abandoned pews stretched toward the altar. Alara wandered slowly until faded crescent carvings emerged beneath layers of moss. She brushed the stone with trembling fingertips. Instantly, the moonstone beneath her collar pulsed with sudden warmth. A single heartbeat echoed through her mind. She gasped and pulled away. The sound disappeared as quickly as it had come. "What happened?" Ronan asked. "I heard someone." Before she could explain, Everett's voice cut through the stillness. "Your Majesty." Outside, fresh hoofprints crossed the clearing. Nearby, a torn strip of black cloth fluttered from a thorn bush. Ronan recognized the stitching immediately. It matched the clothing worn by the hunters who had attacked Caleb's patrol. Everett followed the tracks until he knelt beside disturbed earth. Buried beneath loose soil lay a leather satchel. Inside were maps of Blackridge Citadel, enchanted silver rounds, and a folded parchment sealed with black wax. Ronan broke the seal. His expression changed almost immediately. Everett leaned closer, his face tightening as he read. Alara could not see the words, but she felt the air grow heavier. Before anyone could speak, hoofbeats echoed through the trees. Gideon Mercer emerged with several mounted guards, offering a respectful bow. "Your Majesty, we feared something had happened after losing contact with your escort." His calm gaze drifted toward the open satchel. "Have you found something?" Ronan silently handed him the parchment. Gideon studied it with measured care before lowering it again. "This contains the patrol route used by Caleb's unit, and today's route as well." Everett frowned. "Only a handful of people knew we were coming here." Gideon nodded slowly. "Which means someone shared the information." His eyes settled on Alara for only a heartbeat before looking away, subtle enough to plant doubt without appearing accusatory. Ronan remained silent. He looked from the maps to the silver bullets, then finally toward Alara. She met his gaze without flinching. "I didn't bring those here," she said. "I know how this looks, but I've never seen that satchel before." He wanted to believe her. He remembered the muddy roadside where she had ignored his authority to save Caleb's life. He remembered the care in her hands, the quiet strength that no command had shaken, and the way she had asked for nothing in return. None of that felt like deception. But another memory rose with brutal force. His mother's lifeless body, the smell of silver, the unbearable truth that someone trusted had betrayed her. Years had taught him one lesson above all others. Hesitation could cost an entire kingdom. His jaw tightened. "If you're innocent," he said, his voice lower now, "the truth will clear your name." Pain flickered across Alara's face. And until then, Ronan closed his eyes for the briefest moment before duty overcame hope. "Until then, I cannot ignore the evidence standing in front of me." The disappointment in her eyes struck him harder than any blade. She gave no angry reply, no desperate plea, only a quiet nod that somehow carried even greater hurt. "I thought," she whispered, "you had begun to see who I am." Ronan had no answer. Everett looked between them, visibly uneasy. He had served beside the Alpha King long enough to recognize when an order was breaking the man forced to give it. "Escort Miss Whitmore back to Blackridge," Ronan finally said. "She is to remain in the guest quarters until this investigation is complete. She is not to be harmed." Everett inclined his head, though reluctance was impossible to hide. As Alara mounted her horse, she looked once more toward the ruined chapel. The mysterious heartbeat had vanished. Whatever truth waited inside those ancient walls would remain buried a little longer. Behind her, Ronan watched until the escort disappeared among the trees. Only after she was gone did he lower his head, closing his hand around the folded parchment. For the first time in years, he found himself hoping the evidence was lying, because if it wasn't, he had just condemned the one person who had made him believe trust might still be possible. Everett never treated Alara like a prisoner, yet every step back toward Blackridge reminded her that freedom had already slipped beyond reach. 2 royal guards rode ahead, 2 behind, while the mountain road curved through the narrow cliffs of Moonfall Pass. The evening wind carried the scent of damp stone and pine, but beneath it lingered something sharper that made Alara's instincts tighten. She glanced toward Everett. Has this route always been used? He studied the ridge above them. No. His Majesty ordered the western road. A crease formed between his brows. This isn't the western road. Before either of them could speak again, a rifle cracked across the valley. The lead horse collapsed instantly, throwing its rider into the gravel. Another shot followed, then another. Silver flashed through the fading light. Ambush! Everett shouted. Wolves shifted around the convoy as panic erupted. Their transformations came with snarls and flying dust, but the first silver round struck before they could reach the attackers. One guard cried out as a glowing bullet tore through his shoulder, forcing him back into human form. Alara threw herself behind an overturned wagon while splintered wood exploded beside her. High above, hidden figures emerged among the rocks. Wade Holloway lowered another rifle with practiced precision, directing his hunters as though every movement had been rehearsed. Keep the woman alive, he barked. The king dies today. Alara froze. The king? Ronan wasn't supposed to be anywhere near this road. Everett fought toward her through the chaos, blood running from a cut across his forehead. Stay down, he yelled. This wasn't meant for you. His words barely reached her before fresh hoofbeats thundered from the southern trail. Ronan appeared at the head of a reinforcement patrol, his black cloak streaming behind him as he drove his horse directly into the battle. Relief flashed across Everett's face, but only for an instant. Alara saw what neither of them could. Half the hunters abandoned the convoy and shifted their rifles toward the arriving king. The attack had never been about capturing her. She had merely been the bait. Ronan leaped from his horse before it stopped moving, his wolf bursting forward in a surge of dark muscle and fury. Soldiers rallied behind him, forcing the hunters to retreat higher into the cliffs. Wade remained perfectly calm. He raised one final weapon unlike the others, its barrel etched with pale runes that shimmered against the fading sunlight. Alara remembered Caleb's wound. She remembered Miriam's warning. This was no ordinary silver. Ronan, she screamed. The shot rang out before anyone could react. The bullet struck Ronan beneath his ribs. His enormous wolf staggered, crashing against the rocky slope as an agonized roar echoed through the pass. Instead of healing, black fur around the wound began turning gray. Everett's face drained of color. No. Wade smiled coldly and lifted his rifle again. Finish him. Every instinct told Alara to run. Ronan had doubted her. He had confined her. He had looked into her eyes and chosen suspicion over trust. She owed him nothing, yet she saw Caleb's grateful smile. She remembered the cloak Ronan had laid over a wounded scout without hesitation. She remembered the exhaustion hidden beneath his authority and the grief that had never truly left him. If she fled now, he would die. Alara looked once toward the forest. Escape was still possible. No chains bound her hands. No guard stood close enough to stop her. This was the last moment her old life remained within reach. Then she made the only choice her heart would allow. She stepped out from behind the shattered wagon and ran toward the fallen Alpha King as another silver rifle rose to fire. While high above the battlefield, Wade Holloway calmly gave the order that would change both their destinies forever. Aim for the king, he commanded. If she gets in the way, let the bullets decide. The first silver shot split the air with a sound Alara would never forget. Ronan staggered as the enchanted bullet struck beneath his ribs, his massive black wolf collapsing against the jagged stones of Moonfall Pass. Instead of healing, the wound spread with a cold gray stain that crept through his fur like frost swallowing winter branches. Everett's voice broke across the battlefield. Your Majesty. Wade Holloway calmly raised his rifle again. Around him, the remaining hunters shifted their positions with disciplined precision. They were no longer fighting the royal guard. Every barrel pointed toward the fallen Alpha King. Alara's heart pounded so violently she could barely hear the clash of steel around her. She had every reason to run. Ronan had questioned her honesty. He had believed forged evidence instead of her words. Only hours earlier, he had ordered her confined while refusing to meet her eyes. Beyond the trees, the forest remained open. If she fled now, she could disappear forever. No kingdom, no suspicion, no more fear. Then she looked at Ronan. Even through unbearable pain, he was dragging himself upright, placing his weakened body between Wade's hunters and the wounded soldiers behind him. He was still protecting others while death closed in around him. Something inside Alara gave way. Compassion was stronger than resentment. It always had been. "Ronan!" she cried, breaking into a run. He lifted his head just enough to see her racing across the battlefield. Horror replaced determination. "No," he shouted. "Stay back." She never slowed. Wade watched her with detached amusement. "Fire," he ordered. 5 silver rifles discharged together. The volley raced toward Ronan with deadly precision. Alara threw herself in front of him, spreading both arms without thinking, her only instinct to shield him with her own body. Time seemed to stop. Ronan reached toward her, knowing he would never reach her in time. The first silver bullet came within inches of her chest. Then the moonstone beneath her collar shattered. The sharp crack echoed through Moonfall Pass like breaking ice across a frozen lake. Brilliant white-gold light erupted around Alara, expanding in a radiant circle that wrapped both her and Ronan inside its glow. Every silver bullet struck the luminous barrier at once. Instead of piercing flesh, they froze in midair, suspended for one impossible heartbeat. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, one after another, the bullets bent, darkened, and dropped harmlessly onto the stones with soft metallic echoes. Silence swallowed the battlefield. Even the wind seemed to disappear. Ronan stared upward, unable to look away from the woman kneeling before him. Her chestnut hair drifted in an unseen current. Pale ribbons of lunar light circled her trembling hands, and reflected in her gray-green eyes was a glow unlike anything preserved in royal history. She did not transform into a wolf. She did not become something monstrous. She remained unmistakably herself, yet surrounded by an ancient power no ordinary human could possess. Deep within her chest, a heartbeat answered another heartbeat she had first sensed beneath the floor of Hollow Chapel. The warmth surged through every part of her body until pain overwhelmed her. She cried out and collapsed as fragments of the broken moonstone scattered across the ground. Ronan caught her before she struck the rocks. His own wound burned with silver poison, but he barely noticed. "Alara," he whispered, holding her close. "Stay with me." Her eyes opened only halfway. "You thought I was human," she murmured weakly. The words cut deeper than the bullet lodged beneath his ribs. He lowered his forehead against hers. "I was wrong," he said, his voice breaking with remorse. "And I will regret that for the rest of my life if you leave me now." Above them, Wade Holloway recovered from his shock. His astonishment hardened into ruthless purpose. He climbed onto a boulder and shouted so every surviving hunter could hear. "Stop shooting. She is the prize now. Take the girl alive." Everett rallied the remaining royal guard, forcing the hunters backward while Ronan carried Alara toward the waiting horses. None of them noticed Wade quietly retrieving one of the twisted silver bullets before disappearing into the forest. He closed his fist around the ruined projectile and spoke to the messenger beside him. "Ride to Gideon Mercer," he ordered. "Tell him the last moon-born has awakened." As darkness settled over Moonfall Pass, Ronan refused every offer to hand Alara to another healer. He carried her into Blackridge Citadel himself, unaware that the shattered locket resting beside her had just revealed a truth hidden for more than 2 decades, and that before dawn, someone who had guarded that secret all her life would arrive at the castle gates. When Alara finally opened her eyes, dawn had already spilled across the high windows of Blackridge Citadel. Every breath felt heavy, as though something inside her had been broken open and stitched together again. Ruth Whitmore sat beside the bed with both hands wrapped around Alara's trembling fingers. Tears glistened in the older woman's blue eyes before she managed a weary smile. "I prayed I would reach you in time." Alara searched her face. "You knew this would happen." Ruth closed her eyes briefly. "I knew it could." Before more could be said, Dr. Miriam Caldwell entered quietly, carrying a faded leather journal taken from the royal archives. She placed it beside the bed without taking her eyes off Alara. Your blood confirmed what the old records described, but no one believed anymore. Ruth nodded slowly. Then there is no reason to hide it now. She turned back to Alara. Your parents were not ordinary wolves. They belonged to the Moonborn, a bloodline gifted with the rare ability to weaken the power of enchanted silver. That gift terrified the Silver Covenant. They slaughtered every family they could find. Alara struggled to breathe. My parents, Ruth's voice faltered. They died protecting you. Before they fell, they begged me to seal your wolf and hide your true nature beneath the appearance of an ordinary human. The moonstone your mother left behind carried that seal. As long as it remained whole, no alpha could sense what you truly were. Memories she had never understood flooded through Alara's mind. The white fox, the forbidden chapel, the heartbeat beneath the stone floor, Ruth's frightened warnings. None of it had been coincidence. Ronan entered quietly, moving more slowly than usual. The silver wound beneath his ribs remained heavily bandaged, but he refused assistance as he crossed the room. He stopped several steps away, unable to meet Alara's eyes immediately. I owe you more than an apology. Silence settled between them. I judged you by what I thought you were, he said at last. I let old betrayals decide how I saw you. You saved my life after I failed to trust yours. Alara looked at him for a long moment. That hurt more than the bullets. His shoulders lowered beneath the weight of those words. Without speaking again, Ronan removed the Blackwell signet ring from his finger and placed it carefully on the blanket beside her hand. No one in this kingdom will imprison you again, he said quietly. Not while I still wear this crown. She did not reach for the ring immediately, but neither did she push it away. Across the chamber, Miriam carefully examined the broken fragments of the moonstone. The seal is gone, she warned. Her power will continue awakening. She can no longer return to the quiet life she once knew. Before anyone could answer, Everett hurried into the room, carrying an urgent report. Your Majesty. His normally steady voice carried unmistakable alarm. Our scouts intercepted coded messages. Wade Holloway escaped the pass exactly as we feared. Ronan's expression hardened. Where is he heading? Everett unfolded the recovered note. Not to regroup. He looked directly at Alara. To deliver confirmation that the last Moonborn has awakened. Ruth's face turned pale. Then Gideon was never acting alone. Another silence filled the chamber as every scattered piece finally aligned. The planted evidence. The altered travel route. The impossible timing at Hollow Chapel. The convoy diverted into Moonfall Pass. None of it had been chance. Ronan slowly lifted his gaze toward the council tower overlooking Blackridge. Someone inside these walls has guided every move. Even before he finished speaking, the fortress bell began to ring. Once, twice, then continuously. Everett rushed toward the nearest window. Soldiers were already racing across the courtyard below, while frightened servants fled in every direction. Council summons, he said grimly. Every noble has been ordered to the Obsidian Hall. Ronan understood immediately. Gideon had made his move before they could expose him. Alara slipped the Blackwell signet ring into her hand for the first time. She looked from the shattered moonstone to the king, standing beside her. The truth had finally set them on the same side, but it had also painted a target neither of them could ever erase. Together they turned toward the chamber doors, knowing the next confrontation would no longer be fought in hidden forests or lonely mountain passes. This time, the enemy was waiting inside the heart of the kingdom itself. The bells of Blackridge echoed through every corridor as Ronan, Alara, Everett, and Miriam crossed the crowded courtyard toward the Obsidian Hall. Soldiers hurried past carrying prisoners captured after the fighting at Moonfall Pass. One wounded hunter, realizing escape was impossible, had surrendered a weathered leather book rather than let it fall into another conspirator's hands. Everett had taken it himself. Miriam spent the walk comparing its coded symbols with the cipher preserved in the royal archives. By the time they reached the council chamber, the final entries had been deciphered. The Black Ledger was no longer a mystery. It was proof. Every noble house had answered the emergency summons. Gideon Mercer already stood beside the great stone table, calm beneath dozens of watchful eyes. His black gloves remained immaculate, his expression composed enough to suggest complete innocence. Your Majesty, he said with a courteous bow. "I am relieved to see you survived." Ronan stopped several paces away. "That seems unlikely." Without another word, Everett stepped forward and placed the black ledger on the council table. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Gideon's gaze settled on the worn leather cover for only an instant before returning to Ronan. Miriam laid the decoded cipher beside it. "The symbols match perfectly," she said. "There is no doubt who kept these records." Ronan opened the ledger himself. Hidden payments, secret supply routes, lists of agents embedded across the northern territories. Then he reached the page that made his hands grow still. He turned the book toward the council. Everett read aloud, his steady voice carrying through the silent hall. "Payment authorized for the elimination of Queen Helena Blackwell. Internal intelligence confirmed. Silver Covenant operation approved." No one spoke. For years Ronan had believed his mother's killers had come from outside the kingdom. Now he understood they had walked through its gates with help from someone she trusted. Gideon released a slow breath. "She would have destroyed everything we were trying to preserve." Several council members recoiled. "You admit it," one elder whispered. "I regret only that I failed to finish what I began," Gideon replied. In one swift motion, he drew a concealed dagger and lunged toward Alara. Ronan intercepted the attack before the blade reached her, ignoring the pain that tore through the wound beneath his ribs. Steel rang against steel as Everett forced Gideon backward. At the same instant, several disguised supporters inside the council chamber threw aside ceremonial robes, revealing silver pistols hidden beneath them. The first shots erupted before frightened nobles could react. Alara saw a young guard frozen directly in the line of fire. She moved without hesitation. Instead of resisting the unfamiliar power awakening within her, she welcomed it. Soft white gold light spread from her outstretched hands in quiet waves. Every enchanted bullet entering its reach darkened instantly before falling harmlessly onto the polished stone. Around the chamber, soldiers recovered from their shock and surged forward. Deprived of the silver weapons they had depended upon, Gideon's followers quickly lost their advantage. Wade Holloway attempted to disappear through a side passage, but Everett had anticipated the escape route. Their swords met only once before Wade finally released his weapon onto the floor. "It's over," Everett said. Wade lowered his head without answering. Ronan disarmed Gideon moments later and forced him to his knees before the entire council. Gideon looked toward Alara with exhausted bitterness. "You should never have survived," Ronan answered before she could speak. She survived because compassion proved stronger than hatred. Royal guards surrounded the remaining conspirators and led them away in chains. Slowly, the council members turned toward Alara. Not one of them saw an outsider anymore. The same woman who had once been questioned for lacking a wolf scent had just protected wolves and humans alike without asking who deserved to be saved. Ronan approached quietly after the chamber had emptied. His voice carried none of the authority of a king, only the honesty of a man who had finally laid down years of grief. "When this kingdom has finished healing," he said, "there is something I wish to ask you, not as your alpha." Alara looked at the Blackwell signet resting on her finger, then toward the distant mountains where Hollow Chapel waited beneath the morning sky. The war had ended. The fear had begun to fade. But one final choice remained, and this time it would belong entirely to her. The morning after the council, Blackridge Citadel felt quieter than Alara had ever imagined possible. The frightened whispers were gone. Guards no longer watched her with uncertainty. As she crossed the courtyard beside Ruth, soldiers paused not because of fear, but out of respect. Some bowed their heads. Others simply smiled. It was a welcome she had never expected to receive. In the Great Hall, Ronan stood before representatives from every northern pack. The black ledger rested on the stone dais, its pages now serving as evidence instead of hidden poison. Every surviving member of the Silver Covenant had been arrested, and the routes used to smuggle enchanted ammunition were already being destroyed. For the first time since his mother's death, Ronan addressed his people without carrying the weight of unanswered betrayal. He looked across the gathering until his eyes found Alara. "Years ago," he began, "I believed strength meant never questioning my own judgment. I was wrong." The chamber remained completely silent. I looked at one woman and believed I understood who she was because of what I could not see. I mistook silence for weakness. I mistook kindness for weakness. And I mistook humanity for helplessness. He walked down from the throne instead of speaking above everyone. Stopping before Alara, he bowed his head first. You saved Caleb Monroe when no one else could. You crossed a battlefield to shield me from silver bullets after I failed to trust you. You reminded this kingdom that courage is measured by sacrifice, not by power. Every witness understood what the gesture meant. Their king was not honoring a title. He was honoring a person. Ronan carefully removed the Blackwell signet from Alara's hand, then immediately placed it back into her palm. This time, he said softly, it is yours only if you choose to keep it. Alara closed her fingers around the ring, but did not answer immediately. Instead, she turned toward the gathered council. If I remain, she said, nothing returns to the way it was. No one argued. The border villages will receive the same protection as the royal territories. No child will be hunted because their blood is different. The Hollow Chapel will become a sanctuary again, not a place people fear to remember. And those who still carry hidden gifts will never have to bury who they are simply to survive. One elder slowly stood, then another. Soon the entire hall rose together. Their agreement came without a single spoken objection. Ruth quietly wiped away tears she had hidden for decades. Miriam smiled with unmistakable relief. Everett folded his arms, unable to suppress the grin that finally replaced weeks of caution. Ronan waited until the chamber settled once more. Only then did he speak the words he had carried since Moonfall Pass. I do not ask because prophecy chose you. I do not ask because your bloodline can strengthen my kingdom. I ask because every step beside you has made me a better man than the one who first rode into Ashvale Crossing. He extended his hand. Alara Whitmore, when all crowns and titles are set aside, will you choose to walk beside me? Alara looked toward the restored plans for Hollow Chapel resting beside the council records. Workers had already begun clearing the old sanctuary so it could become a place where wolves, humans, and every surviving Moonborn family could gather without fear. The future she had dreamed of was already beginning to take shape. Her gaze then drifted to the crystal case displaying the broken moonstone locket beside the warped silver bullets that had failed to claim a king. Once, those relics had represented loss, secrecy, and fear. Now they stood as reminders that compassion had changed the fate of an entire kingdom. She slipped the signet onto her finger by her own choice before placing her hand in Ronan's. Yes, she whispered. Cheers echoed through Blackridge as sunlight poured across the hall, bathing wolves, humans, and Moonborn alike beneath the same warm light. Months later, the restored Hollow Chapel had become exactly what Alara promised. Wolf children and human children ran together beneath the ancient stone arches while travelers sought healing instead of hiding. Families who had concealed their Moonborn heritage for generations finally stepped into the light without fear of persecution. Caleb, fully recovered, laughed beside Everett as they placed the final carved stone above the sanctuary entrance. Ruth watched them with peaceful eyes, knowing the promise she had made to Alara's parents had finally been fulfilled. Above the entrance hung two preserved reminders of the past, Alara's broken moonstone locket and the deformed silver bullets that had once carried death. Visitors often asked why such painful relics were displayed so proudly. Alara would simply smile and answer, because the day someone believed I was only human became the day love, truth, and courage proved stronger than fear. And whenever Ronan reached for her hand, he never forgot the lesson that had transformed both the king he became and the man he chose to be. True strength is gentle, and the greatest destiny is not discovering who someone is. It is choosing to truly see them at last.